Get ready to be transported to a world of icy isolation and chilling rules. In this video, we explore the unforgiving environment of a remote Alaskan oil rig, where survival is paramount and the night brings a unique set of regulations. You won't believe what they have to do just to stay alive. Arrival at the end of the world. There's a moment, right before the propellers of the chopper slow and the silence of the Arctic presses against your ears, where you question everything. Why you took this job? Why you thought 2 months isolated on a remote Alaskan oil rig would be a good idea? Why the company paid nearly double for night shift workers? I was already asking myself these questions as the helicopter descended onto the landing pad, ice whipping around in a frenzy below. The rig was a jagged fortress rising from the frozen ocean like a steel beast. Towering cranes stood like sentinels, coated in thick layers of frost, their movements groaning under the weight of ice. Below, shadowed walkways and scaffoldings crisscrossed in a tangle of iron veins, each walkway slick with permafrost and haunted by the howling wind. The place looked less like a workplace and more like the final resting place of something ancient and long forgotten. I stepped off the chopper and into the cold. It wasn't just cold. It was the kind of cold that chewed through layers, bit into your bones, and whispered threats in your ears. I took my first breath, and it felt like I had inhaled splinters of glass. My thermal gear was top grade, but I still felt exposed, vulnerable. New guy. The voice came from a tall man wrapped in oil-streaked Carhartt gear, his eyes nearly swallowed by a thick balaclava. He reached out a gloved hand. "I'm Brooks, safety supervisor." I nodded and shook his hand, instantly feeling the strength in his grip. Not just physical. Brooks had that unspoken authority, the kind born from years of surviving this desolate place. "First time on a rig?" "First time in Alaska," I said, watching my breath curl out like smoke. He gave a humorless laugh. "You picked the worst one then." Brooks didn't bother sugarcoating anything. As he walked me through the narrow corridors of the rig, his words were clipped, efficient, and burdened with a permanent edge of warning. "This isn't a typical offshore platform," he explained. "We're 40 miles off the Alaskan coast. There's no quick extraction. If something goes wrong," he stopped, turned, and looked me straight in the eyes. "You handle it, or you don't make it." Inside, the rig wasn't much warmer. The heat was functional but inconsistent. Some corridors were cozy enough. Others felt like walking through a freezer. The walls groaned with age and temperature stress, their metal bones warping in the relentless freeze. Brooks led me to the control hub, a cramped, humming room where 4 monitors flickered with seismic data, equipment diagnostics, and weather reports. From here, operations were coordinated. At night, I'd man this room alone. "You're on the night shift," he confirmed, handing me a laminated card. "These are your rules. Follow them, especially the ones for post 01:00 hours." I looked down at the list. It seemed simple enough at first. Night shift protocol, essential rules. 1. All safety gear must be worn at all times outside crew quarters. 2. No movement outside after 0100 hours without radio clearance. 3. Do not respond to voices calling from outside after 1 o'clock hours. 4. Keep floodlights facing outward at full brightness throughout the night. 5. If the foghorn activates 3 times consecutively between 1 to 3 o'clock, initiate lockdown. 6. Never open the emergency hatch on the lower east deck, even if someone knocks. I blinked. This a joke? Brooks didn't laugh. You'll understand soon enough. That night, I met the rest of the crew. Only 13 of us in total, including the cook, medic, and engineer. The others were seasoned, all grim-eyed and tight-lipped. No small talk, no smiles. When I asked about the rules, a few exchanged glances, but no one offered an explanation. "It's best to see for yourself," said a man named Callahan, a thick-set welder with a scar running from his temple to the corner of his jaw. "Just follow them." It was around midnight when I started my first official shift in the control hub. I sipped coffee gone lukewarm, watching the monitors blink steadily. Outside the small, reinforced windows, darkness blanketed the rig. Not just absence of light darkness. This was a living, breathing thing, thick and oppressive. The kind of darkness that made you feel watched. I clicked on the intercom and performed the hourly check-ins. Each department responded in monotone. Pump station stable. Drill, temperature nominal. No seismic activity. Everything seemed fine, but I couldn't shake the feeling of being tested. At 12:56 a.m., I glanced at the laminated rule card again. Rule 2 would go into effect in 4 minutes. No movement outside without radio clearance. I stood up and checked the floodlights, each one casting blinding white arcs into the gloom. Snow blew horizontally past them, forming shifting white curtains. The sea beyond was invisible. Then, at 1:04 a.m., I heard it. A voice. Faint. Muffled. "Help." I froze. "Is anyone there? Please." It came from the far end of the corridor, near the emergency exit. I looked at the clock. 1:06 a.m. Rule 3. Do not respond to voices calling from outside after 0100 hours. I hesitated. Maybe it was a prank. Maybe one of the crew trying to test the new guy. But the voice, it sounded desperate. Panicked. A woman's voice. Crying for help. I picked up the radio. "This is Control to Brooks. Are you by the East Corridor?" No response. I repeated. "Brooks, this is Control. Do we have someone outside?" I'm hearing static. Then, out of the corner of my eye, movement. A figure, just beyond the floodlights, past the reinforced glass of the corridor. Pale, thin, drenched in something dark. I squinted. The figure looked like a woman, barefoot, her arms limp at her sides. Her mouth moved as if screaming, but no sound reached me through the thick glass. Her eyes were wide, almost hollow. She lifted a trembling hand and pressed it against the window. A knock, soft at first, then again, louder. I stepped back. Rule 6. Never open the emergency hatch on the lower east deck, even if someone knocks. My heart hammered. My skin prickled with a cold far worse than the Arctic air. I turned off the floodlight facing that direction. The figure vanished in the sudden darkness. I called again on the radio, this time cycling through all frequencies. "Anyone there? I need confirmation on exterior activity. Now." A hiss of static. Then Brooks' voice, low and calm. "You saw her, didn't you?" I didn't answer. "Stay inside," he said. "Lock the hub. Don't leave till 0600. "But who was that?" I whispered. Another burst of static. No one. That's the point. The line went dead. I did what he said. I locked the hub. I shut down the corridor camera feeds. But I didn't sleep. I sat there in the humming glow of the control panels, eyes darting to the windows, waiting for another knock. By morning, the sun was a dull smear across the frozen sea. When I emerged, the rest of the crew went about their routine like nothing had happened. No one spoke about the voice. No one mentioned the woman. But when I passed Brooks in the dining hall, he said one thing. You followed the rules. You'll last longer than most. I didn't eat breakfast that morning. I couldn't. My stomach was twisted into a frozen knot. And in the hallway leading to my bunk, I found something smeared across the inside of the window. Something brown, almost reddish, in the shape of a handprint. But we were 30 miles offshore. No one should have been out there. You learn quickly not to ask questions on the rig. Curiosity is a luxury people don't afford themselves out here. After my first night shift, I expected someone to pull me aside, maybe offer an explanation, or even a word of encouragement. But silence clung to the crew like frost on metal. Everyone just kept their eyes a little too low, their shoulders a little too hunched, as if they were trying to become invisible. Still, there were things I needed to know, things the laminated card hadn't prepared me for, like the fact that no one used the corridor past the lower deck after dark, or how, even in daylight, people flinched when walking by the east emergency hatch. Most of the crew avoided it entirely, like it was cursed. By the third night, I stopped trying to make small talk. Every answer was a brick wall. Even the cook, an older woman named Nina, just shook her head when I asked about the night rules. You follow them, she said, and you don't listen too long when they whisper. That's all you need to know. She wouldn't say more. She just pushed a tray across the counter with trembling hands and mumbled something about keeping your ears busy. I later found a box of old cassette tapes in my locker, Arctic wind recordings, engine noise, even white noise loops labeled use during night shift. That night, I used one. I didn't think it would matter, but it did. At exactly 12:58 a.m., the air pressure dropped again. I could feel it, not in my ears, but in my bones, like something large was breathing in from outside. I activated the perimeter floodlights and checked the cameras. Nothing unusual, just swirling snow and endless dark. I switched the tape recorder on, letting the low hum of static play in the background as I monitored the equipment diagnostics. Then, the lights flickered, only for a second, but it was enough. The floodlights outside dimmed to a pulse, and then flared back up. On the far camera, Deck 4, a shadow darted across the screen. I rewound it. There it was. Less than a second. A blur, human-sized, hunched, and crawling low across the icy metal like a predator. It moved unnaturally fast, its limbs jerking at odd angles. I paused the feed. No crew member would be out there, not without radio clearance. And certainly not like that. I reached for the intercom. Control to Deck 4. Confirm no personnel outside. Repeat. Confirm no personnel on Deck 4. Silence. Then static. Then, help me. Please. The same voice. A woman again. But it wasn't coming from the intercom. It was coming from behind the door to the main hallway. Open the hatch. I can't get in. It's so cold. I stood slowly, my blood crawling. She was here. Again. I took one careful step toward the door and shut off the speaker volume on the monitor. The voice continued. And this time, it wasn't just one voice. Another started, male, low and raspy. We're stuck out here. Let us in. And another. Then another. Within 30 seconds, it sounded like a chorus of pleading, whispering voices surrounding the control room. They weren't loud, but they were constant. Like the wind had found a voice and used it to beg. I backed away. The laminated card was still taped to the desk. Do not respond to voices calling from outside after 0100 hours. The clock said 1:11 a.m. I picked up the radio. Brooks, this is Control. I need backup. Now. His voice crackled through. Stay in the room. Keep the lights on. Don't open anything. I know that, but don't talk to them. Don't acknowledge them. You hear me. Then, 3 sharp knocks. Not on the control room door. Not on the glass. On the floor. The hatch. The emergency hatch beneath deck 4. The one from the rule card. Rule 6. Never open the emergency hatch on the lower east deck. Even if someone knocks. It was faint. Deliberate. Knock. 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 The pressure inside the control room shifted. My ears popped. The walls creaked softly, like something was trying to settle its weight onto the rig. I could hear the low groan of metal flexing. And the wind didn't howl anymore. It hissed. On instinct, I killed the exterior mics. The moment I did, the voices vanished. I turned up the white noise tape, retreating to the far wall of the control room. That night, I didn't move until the sun returned. When morning finally came, I emerged blinking into the pale light. Brooks was waiting at the corridor junction. His eyes locked on mine. No words were spoken. He led me silently to a small supply room on deck 2. Once inside, he closed the door, drew the bolt, and finally spoke. "What did you hear?" I told him. He listened without interrupting, only nodding once or twice. Then he leaned back against the wall and lit a cigarette. Against the posted no smoking sign, I noticed. "That hatch," he said, exhaling smoke through his nose, "used to be used for cargo drops. Before we figured out it wasn't safe. What's out there? We don't know. We call them the lost." I stared. "You mean people?" "Not anymore. Maybe they were once." He looked at me. "But the sea, it changes things. Especially here. Some say this patch of water covers an ancient trench, deeper than anything mapped. The pressure down there, it does things to you. Or maybe something comes up." I shivered. "Sometimes," he continued, "we lose crew. Men go out past curfew. They don't come back. Days later, we'll hear them outside. Their voices, begging. But they're not right. Not anymore. Has anyone ever opened the hatch?" Brooks didn't answer right away. Then, finally, once, about 6 years back, during a winter wideout, I waited. They found the hatch open. No signs of forced entry. Just blood and frostbite marks on the inside of the glass. Like someone had tried to claw their way out after they let something in. The room fell into heavy silence. Then Brooks ground the cigarette out on the floor and stepped away from the wall. "You follow the rules. You'll be okay," he said. "You break even one, just once, you're done." I wanted to ask more, but something in his face warned me not to. He left, and I returned to my bunk to rest before the next shift. But I couldn't sleep, because when I sat on my cot and took off my boots, I found something. A scrap of cloth, tucked beneath my bed, drenched in frozen seawater. It was a piece of thermal lining, torn from a jacket. There were letters stitched into the edge. A name tag, M. Reyes. I didn't know anyone by that name. When I asked around that evening, no one else did either, or claimed not to. But I noticed how quiet everyone became when I showed it to them, and how one of the older crew, Jackie, the maintenance lead, turned pale before saying, "Better burn that." I did, but the stink that came from it wasn't cloth. It smelled like decay, and brine, and something else, something wrong. That night, I went on shift early. I didn't trust the safety of daylight anymore. The ocean seemed too still, the wind too quiet. At 12:03 a.m., I checked the camera feed for the lower east deck. The hatch was frosted over, but something had written across the condensation in crooked letters. "I remember you." The hatch stayed locked. I checked it 5 times that day. By the time I returned to the control hub for my next night's shift, The memory of those frost-scrawled words had etched themselves into my skull. I remember you. But that wasn't possible. I'd never been to Alaska before. Never worked on a rig. Never met anyone named M. Reyes. And yet, deep in my gut, something twisted in recognition when I'd read it. A cold thread of memory tugged at something buried far beneath, like the trench Brooks had mentioned. That night, the weather turned. The winds picked up. The sea roared louder than usual, crashing against the base of the rig with enough force to shutter the metal walkways. Visibility dropped to less than 10 feet, and a thick curtain of fog rolled in by midnight, something the crew referred to as the White Shroud. "It's earlier than usual," Brooks said over the radio. "Keep the floodlights on max, don't switch them off for any reason." I didn't ask why. I just followed orders. But even under full brightness, the fog refused to clear. It clung to the rig like a living thing, dense and writhing. Every shape in it seemed to move just slightly, just enough to trick the eye. I sat in the hub, bathed in the glow of red status lights and static from the radio, trying to shake the growing pressure in my chest. 1:17 a.m. The foghorn went off. Once. A long, droning blare that vibrated the walls. Then silence. I scrambled for the laminated card. Rule 5. If the foghorn activates 3 times consecutively between 0100 to 0300, initiate lockdown. So far, just once. I radioed Brooks. Control to supervisor. Foghorn triggered. Single blast. Should I be concerned? No answer. Only static. I toggled through frequencies. Still nothing. Then, from the speaker, came a different voice entirely. A soft, childlike whisper. "Don't you remember me?" I froze. The tape recorder still hummed with white noise. I turned the volume up. The voice faded, but not completely. It was under the noise, like it was inside the room now. I reached for the camera feeds. The lower east deck was engulfed in fog, completely obscured. But on deck 5, the upper maintenance level, I saw a figure. Not walking, crawling. The same spindly form I'd caught on the camera days ago, dragging itself along the grating with unnatural angles. Its arms and legs bent the wrong way. Its head twisted too far to the left, as though it had been dislocated. Then the camera flickered. The figure was gone. In its place, a wet handprint on the lens. I checked the system logs. No crew member had clearance to be on that level. None had reported going outside. And yet something was. Another foghorn blast. Twice now. I felt my skin tighten. The air was thick, not just with tension, but with wrongness. Like the atmosphere itself was poisoned by presence. I turned toward the window. Through the misted glass, I saw a shape standing just outside. Tall, lean, wearing what looked like a crew jacket. I leaned closer. The figure raised a hand and waved. It was wearing my face. I stumbled back from the window, my breath catching in my throat. No, that wasn't possible. But it was. The figure was a perfect mirror of me. Same gear, same gloves, even the same lanyard swinging from its neck. Then it smiled. Not a natural smile. Too wide, too slow, like someone wearing a face they didn't understand. It mouthed something. I watched in horror as the lips formed the words. Open the hatch. The third foghorn blast erupted, shaking the hub. The lights dimmed for 2 full seconds. The emergency system auto-triggered. Steel shutters began sliding down over the windows. Lockdown. I grabbed the override, slamming the command. But then the feed from the lower east deck came back online. The hatch was open. Not fully. Just enough to let in a sliver of night. Brooks, I screamed into the radio. The hatch is open. I didn't open it. Repeat, I did not open it. The only reply, heavy breathing, then a voice I didn't recognize. I knew you'd come back eventually. The lockdown alarm blared again, and this time, the lights cut completely. My breath fogged in the sudden cold. Something was wrong with the temperature. Fast. It dropped a full 20 degrees in under a minute. I could feel the cold clawing its way into the room, as if it wasn't coming from the environment, but from something entering it. I activated the emergency heaters. Nothing. The system was dead. And then I heard footsteps. Wet, dragging ones. But they weren't coming from the hallway. They were coming from the ceiling. Slow. Scraping. Then the sound of something heavy dropping behind me. I turned, hand trembling toward the floodlight switch. In the red backup glow, something stood at the far end of the room. It looked like me, but its movements stuttered like a corrupted video file. Its limbs flickered between positions, arms out, arms at sides, head cocked, head straight. Its mouth opened wide enough to split its cheeks. No teeth, just a black, gaping hole. I remember what you did, it said in my voice. I didn't wait. I lunged for the manual alarm and slammed it. The lights roared back on. The thing vanished with a hiss of steam, leaving behind a puddle of ice-slicked footprints. Brooks and Callahan found me huddled beneath the control desk when they finally arrived, still clutching the rule card like a lifeline. The hatch opened. I choked. Something got in. It wore my face. They exchanged a look. Then Brooks nodded grimly. They're not just imitating voices now. They're evolving. I stared at him. What do you mean evolving? Brooks crouched beside me, placing a gloved hand on my shoulder. 6 months ago, they could only knock. Then came the voices. Then the shapes. Now they're learning. What are they? His voice dropped to a whisper. They're what happens when the sea remembers us. That night, the hatch was sealed with emergency welds. But I didn't sleep. I lay in my bunk, cassette tape running on loop, and stared at the ceiling. Because I couldn't stop thinking about what that thing had said. I remember what you did. But I hadn't done anything. Not here. Not yet. Unless I had. Somewhere else. Or some time before. Sleep became a currency I could no longer afford. Even with the white noise tapes playing on loop, my nights off shift were tormented by half-dreams of voices outside the rig, whispering memories that didn't belong to me. The face in the fog haunted me, not just because it wore my features, but because it seemed disappointed, like I had broken a promise I didn't remember making. Brooks, for all his bluntness, was the only one who didn't treat me like I was losing my mind. He started bringing me coffee during transition shifts and quietly slipped into the control hub during changeovers, checking the exterior seals himself before I even asked. I ran a full diagnostic, he said one morning as the sun weakly glinted across the steel deck. That hatch didn't unlock itself. Then how the hell did it open? He gave a tight shrug. Same way the dead keep knocking. This place doesn't care about physics or logic. What do you mean? Brooks studied me for a long moment. Then he opened his jacket and handed me something. A dog tag. Reyes. M. 2217 to 2004. My stomach clenched. Where did you get this? I whispered. That name on the cloth you found. Reyes worked this rig 3 years ago. His body was never recovered. Just a trail of prints leading out toward the edge of the platform. Nothing on the cameras. No sign of struggle. One day he was here. Next, he was gone. But why would something leave his name under my bed? That's the part one haven't figured out, Brooks muttered. Unless... He trailed off. Unless what? I pressed. He didn't answer. That night, the fog rolled in even earlier. By 9 p.m., the rig was swallowed whole. The floodlights barely lit a few feet in front of the windows. I checked the feed cameras compulsively, especially the lower east deck, even though it had been welded shut days ago. At 10:17 p.m., something new happened. A loud clang reverberated through the hub. Not the sound of something hitting metal, but something landing on it. I flipped to camera 4, roof view. A shape was crouched above the hub. I blinked. It wasn't a shape. It was a person. They wore a rig uniform soaked to the bone, their body crouched animal-like, head tilted toward the camera. Slowly, they raised a hand and tapped the lens with one crooked finger. The camera went black. The emergency line buzzed. I answered. "This is Control." A familiar voice came through. Female. Gentle. "You left us. Who is this? You said you'd come back. That you'd finish it." The line clicked dead. The system log showed no incoming call. I checked the crew manifest for Reyes' final report. It was buried in a redacted incident log titled Personnel Psychological Incident, Alpha Deck. Attached was a single note from the medic at the time. Subject reported vivid hallucinations of drowning. Claimed they were calling him into the trench. Refused sleep for 96 hours. Final log entry stated, "I see them when I close my eyes. They remember me, and I think I remember them." Goosebumps danced across my spine. The trench, that same one Brooks had mentioned, beneath the platform. Was it possible something was rising from it? At midnight, the rig went silent. Not the equipment, the wind. The wind, the sea, the creaking of the rig. Everything went dead quiet. I looked outside and saw nothing but fog. Absolute stillness. Then a faint sound started. Not knocking. Not voices. Breathing. Deep and guttural. Amplified through the metal. The entire structure trembled with the sound of it. I opened the live seismic feed. Tremor detected. 2.4 magnitude. Depth. Unknown. The camera on deck 2 flickered. A silhouette stood there, facing the sea, not moving. I radioed Callahan. "Do we have someone on deck 2? I'm seeing." He cut me off. "No one should be out. I'm locking down." The moment he said it, the breathing stopped. The floodlights burst, one after another, cascading across the rig like dominoes. Each pop left a section of the rig swallowed in thick, black void. Only the hub stayed lit. Then came the whisper, not from the outside, from inside the walls. We never left. The lights in the hub dimmed, replaced with a flickering emergency red. On the main monitor, a single feed activated, one I'd never seen before. Labeled, Trench Camera, Level 7. I clicked it. A grainy underwater view appeared. Murky blackness shifting, debris swirling. Then a movement. Something massive coiled through the frame. Scales, ridges, impossible length. The water churned around it like boiling tar. Then eyes. Not human. Not animal. Something that had never seen the surface world. Staring directly into the camera, as if it knew I was watching. Then the feed cut. The monitor turned black, and one final message scrolled across the screen in white block letters. "Return what you took." That's when I remembered. Not everything. Not clearly. But enough. 2 years ago. A contract job in a supply sub. I delivered containers to this very rig. Didn't know it then. Just a quick stop. We'd been delayed by a blizzard and forced to dock. There'd been an accident. A cargo container broke loose. We weren't supposed to open it. We did anyway. Inside was something old. Fossilized. Maybe. But it didn't stay that way. One of the men, Reyes, touched it. After that, things got bad. There was a fire. A panic. We fled. The logs were erased. The contract dissolved. I took the buyout and never looked back. But something had followed. Something buried beneath the trench. And now I was waking up. The last thing I saw on the screen that night was Reyes' face, half frozen, half melted, pressing against the glass of the outside window, staring in at me with hollow eyes. His lips moved. You brought it here. The past wasn't supposed to catch up with me. Not here. But in the frozen belly of that rig, truth had a way of clawing to the surface. I spent the following day in a fog of dread, unable to eat, sleep, or even pretend to function. That message, return what you took, looped in my brain like a commandment I'd long forgotten but was now being judged against. And the worst part, I didn't know what I took. Brooks found me sitting alone in the supply corridor, staring at a cracked piece of pipe that reminded me of that fossil. Whatever we pulled from the trench 2 years ago. His face was pale, thinner than I remembered it. You remember, don't you? He said. I looked up. You were there too. He nodded. I was on the rig when your sub docked. I saw what happened. I saw what Reyes became. I swallowed. What was that thing? We thought it was just rock. Fossilized coral. Maybe a spine or a scale. But it wasn't dead. Not really. It was dormant, waiting. Reyes touched it first. That's when the hallucination started. Then he went out onto the deck, and he didn't come back. Why didn't you report it? I asked. We tried, he said. The company buried it, paid us off, changed rosters. They scattered the survivors across different rigs, different names. I ended up here again. Don't ask me why. Maybe I was drawn back, like you were. That word again. Drawn. I didn't believe in fate, but this wasn't chance. That night, the fog rolled in before the sun even dipped below the horizon. It came thick and heavy, coating the rig in a wet film that slicked the walkways and silenced the sea. No wind, no waves, just stillness. At 8:46 p.m., the lights began to fail, one by one, in perfect order, starting from the outermost tower and moving inward. By 9:12 p.m., the rig was completely blacked out. Only the hub remained lit, barely. And in that flickering, dying light, the emergency monitors switched on. Alert! Unauthorized entry. East deck. Hatch status. Breached. I stared in disbelief. We'd welded it shut. I radioed Brooks. He answered immediately. I'm at the hatch. It's wide open, but the weld's still intact. My blood turned to ice. That's not possible. That's not the word I'd use for anything anymore. Static burst through the line, followed by a long, low tone, like a pressure alarm, but deeper, almost biological. Then his voice quiet, ragged. They're inside. The transmission ended. I bolted from the hub, clutching the emergency flare gun. The fog met me like a wall. Visibility dropped to less than an arm's length. But I kept going, following the thrum in my chest that told me Brooks was still alive. Down the corridor, past the common rooms, through the hall by the kitchen where a strange, briny smell lingered in the air. Wet rot and ocean decay. On the walls, condensation formed words. You belong to the depths. The east corridor loomed ahead, door ajar, ice cracking under my boots. I turned the corner and stopped cold. Something was standing over Brooks. It wasn't Reyes. It wasn't me. It was a towering, hunched mass of flesh and bone, dripping with seawater, eyes glowing dim and blue like bioluminescent lures from the trench. Its skin looked stretched, torn in places, revealing webbing beneath. Tentacle-like strands twitched from its spine, each moving as if sniffing the air. Brooks was on the floor, breathing but unconscious. The thing turned its head toward me and smiled. "You brought me here." The voice wasn't spoken. It was inside me, like a memory I couldn't block. Then it stepped back into the fog, phased through it like smoke, and was gone. I dragged Brooks back to the hub. He woke briefly as I sealed the doors. "They were waiting for you," he said. "Not for me. You." I couldn't argue. It was my burden, my past mistake, and somehow I had to end it. I went back into the logs, every transmission, every audio file Reyes had made. One in particular stood out, an old recorded broadcast from his final week. "I've been dreaming in water. The trench speaks in pulses. It wants what we took. It wants to be remembered. The trench wants memory." The rig was positioned above that same trench. I opened the maintenance override and accessed the seismic probe release. I didn't ask permission. I just did it. I dropped all 6 weighted probes into the sea below, each carrying data cores and emergency beacon pings. As they fell, I patched through an old subcargo manifest. In it was the fossil ID, specimen A12, black coral structure, origin unknown, return pending. I flagged it as returned, and I said something aloud, something I didn't understand, but which came from deep within my chest, like an echo of Reyes' last scream. "Take it back." I give it back. Then silence. For 10 whole minutes. Then the fog began to lift. The sea calmed. The wind returned. And the rig stopped groaning. Later, when I looked back at the hatch camera, it was closed. Sealed. No breach. No marks. No blood. The weld was untouched. Brooks woke up that morning groggy but alive. When I asked him what he saw, he just said, "It had your eyes." I submitted a resignation that morning. So did he. We didn't speak during the chopper ride out, but as the rig shrank beneath us, its towers jutting like broken teeth from the ice, I realized something. Not everything that gets left behind stays behind. Not in places like that. In the trench below the rig, where things older than memory stir in the silence, there are rules we were never meant to break. Rules about what can be unearthed, what can be woken, and what should never be carried away. Even now, back on solid ground, I sometimes hear the foghorn in the distance. 3 long blasts, calling me back.